smoke is clean. I'm brushing away for you, the way for you, the way for you. Don't need a no
Hey, what's up guys, Unkillable here. Today we're going to be going over the updated Unkillable Harbinger build. Disclaimer, this is a work in progress because I don't have the apocalypse version of every piece, but the build itself stays mostly the same. So unfortunately part of this build did get nerfed, so we're going to go over that. But first, the Morning Winds mod. They did slightly nerf the damage on this, but it's still worth using. It's still pretty good damage. But the big thing that they did change is the Grand Opening mod and the Scrap Grenade mod. They changed the cooldown on these to 3 seconds as opposed to 1 second. So you can't just shoot once, reload, shoot once, reload. You do have to wait now, so that does definitely hurt our DPS. So I've been working on trying to find a replacement for that. This right here, the Messenger, seems pretty good so far. The first mod, Dimensional Rockets, critical shots, fire 4 rockets in a small area, each rocket dealing 200k damage. Obviously this will increase as you get it to a higher level. I found that this is pretty good actually. Against smaller enemies it's not as good because not all 4 rockets is gonna hit the one enemy, but against like a big enemy like an elite, each and every rocket is gonna hit that boss or that elite, and it does pretty good damage. Now the one on the bottom, the Death Ray mod, aiming down sights will deal 50k damage every 0.3 seconds. Now I've tested this. The DPS on this is actually pretty good and it's pretty consistent because there's like no cooldown or anything like that. You just aim and then a second later the beam will fire and you could just keep shooting it over and over. So this is pretty consistent good DPS. The mod on the bottom, you can't change that. I just got that randomly. It's pretty okay, but obviously you can't really control what mod you get on the bottom. If you get a better mod than this, then great, that's even more DPS. Other than that, the armor pieces that we're using don't really change from the last build, but there is one thing I want to clarify. On the 2 purple pieces that we're using, you do want to get max health and cooldown reduction as the main attribute. The reason we're trying to increase our health as much as possible is because our shield actually does scale to our health bar. So the more HP we have, the more shield we have, so that's gonna increase our survivability. And there is some parts of the new trial that will push you to the edge of your survivability, so this is actually pretty important this time around. Ended up changing one mod on the boots. Instead of the time crack mod, we're going to be using the even odds mod. Increases your max health by 10% for every enemy within 10 meters of you, stacks up to 3 times. So because you're constantly surrounded by enemies, basically this is basically 30% extra health, which does also increase your max shield by 30%, so just straight up increases your survivability. Now I'm going to quickly show off what mods I'm using. If you guys want an in-depth guide on each mod that I'm using and why I'm using it, I'll leave the original build video in the description. These are the skills we're using. They are exactly the same, nothing changes here. Are the class tree nodes. Again, not much has changed. Now here's the interesting part. With this update, we did get access to the packs tree, which is basically a separate tree of passives that you can use. The first one we're going to be using is the Triggerman. Your damage is increased by 15% for every skill on cooldown. Basically a constant 30 to 45% extra damage because we're going to be using skills constantly. Okay, the next one, Lies Deception. Activating Deception skills grants you 15% shield every 1 second for 4 seconds. So basically every time you pop a skill you get 60% of your shield back. Now that alone is pretty good, but since we're using the Harbinger tree, the last node, every activation of a deception skill grants you 50% shield. You're basically going to be at 100% shield constantly. There's going to be very little things that can threaten you with this setup. Okay, the next one, Failsafe Protocols. When your health drops below 30%, get 50% shield. This one is okay. There's been little times where this has been activated for me, but there are some bosses that can hit you really hard, so this is actually kind of useful in those situations. But You don't really have a choice with this one. You need this one to move on to the next node. Goals beyond understanding. Damage done to elites tagged with a deception skill have a 25% chance to be increased by 200%. You would be surprised how often this activates, and since we're already hitting for like a couple million, increasing that by 200% is really good. Now with the next node, this is gonna get even crazier. Schemer. 200% of killing damage on enemies tagged with a deception skill is divided amongst other tagged enemies. This right here is really good. This is gonna be a good chunk of your damage. This is basically like that mod we use. Where is it? Pain transfer. This is basically another version of pain transfer, except it's a lot better. If you basically trigger this one right here, the goals beyond understanding, and you divide that among other enemies or other elites, you're gonna clear that entire group of enemies. The elites are gonna die, the enemies are gonna die. If you have a boss in there, the boss can get one-shotted. This mod is actually crazy. There's been a couple times where I've one-shotted bosses with this. This is by far the best node in the tree, and there is no other node that you need to use. But yeah guys, that's basically it. I will be making another version of this build once I get to max level. Once I get all the apocalypse gear I need, I'll be making a final version of this build, and hopefully it's a lot better than this one, even though this one is already pretty crazy. But yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good one.